Hello everyone and welcome back to another Ruby on Rails speedrun. Today we're going to be trying an entire chat room. So we'll just go ahead, we'll create a new Rails project and we'll get started. Say Rails new, I'll call it video, I'll give it a -J of ES build and a -C of bootstrap. So for a chat room, we're obviously going to need Turbo. We have covered this before with the Turbo Chat series, so a lot of this will probably be familiar, but hopefully we can see how quickly we can spin something like this up. Basic plan is we're going to have a list of chat rooms. You go into a chat room has a chat box, users have to be logged in. If a user sends a message, it should go to everyone else, including that user. It should clear the form, and it should scroll the chat box to the bottom of that form. Or bottom of that message, I think, or whatever. So we got to figure out how to do that. Let's go ahead and do our generation. So the first thing we need is, let's do a bundle add for devise and simple form. It'll give us those two gems because we do have bootstrap. So simple form will format our forms. So let's say a Rails G simple underscore form :install -- bootstrap. Then we're going to want to do a Rails G devise :install. Then we want to do a Rails G devise user. Then we want to do the Rails G devise :views command, which will generate those views, which adds the simple form styling to them. So those will look good. We then need to do a Rails G scaffold for the rooms. Each room will have a name and nothing else. You could probably associate it with users if you wanted to. We then need to do a Rails G model for the message. A message should have some body content, which we'll just leave as a string by default. A user : belongs to, and a room : belongs to. I think that's good. We can go ahead and run that. Hopefully that works. Let's do a Rails DB : migrate just to check. Looks like it does. Let's go ahead and open this up in VS Code with a code dot. My terminal is going to look weird because it's zoomed in too far. Come over here and we'll full screen this. Let's hit Control+ a couple times. Control+, and then hopefully that'll zoom in. We can come into our routes.rb to start off, I suppose. And in here, what we want to do, we have our resources rooms. We want to set the root of the application to be the rooms controller index action. Our resources rooms need to wrap around our messages. We can do resources messages, although we're only going to have a create action here. We'll just leave it like this. The other thing we're going to need to do is our seed file. So let's come into our DB and our seeds.rb. We're going to need to do a user.create. We're going to need to create two users. One's going to need a email of dean@example.com with a comma after it to get our password and then our password confirmation. We don't need this trailing comma here. We can copy this, paste it down here, and change this to john@doe.com. And then we can come down here and we can do a room.create. And for this, we're going to want to do a general room for the name. We can then close this, copy this, paste this, and we'll just come in here and say testing or something. We can do one more. Maybe this one will be random, right? Go ahead and do something like that. Now let's do a Rails DB :seed command to add this data to our database. Then we can do a bin dev. However, because we're using a Turbo Chat application, we're going to want Redis added to our proc file. So in here, we'll just say Redis-server. Need to make sure I say Redis and not Redis, or I'll get a dissertation in the comments from some guy who really thinks that's the key point of the video. We can now do a bin/dev to hopefully start the server without anything blowing up too bad. Okay, cool. So we're in here. We have our localhost port 3000. Next step, let's close the config, close the DB, come into app, views, layouts, application.html.erb, and let's just wrap everything inside of a container. We're not going to do a margin top this time just because we're going to need to see in the room without needing to resize everything. Okay, so that's good. Let's come into an individual room now. Actually, wait, before I do that, let's come into the rooms. Let's come into the index for the rooms. And instead of rendering the entire room, we're just going to render the room.name. Capitalize. Reason why we're doing this is because once we start rendering all the messages, we're going to get some errors with some stuff that's still null unless we do it this way. So now we can go to a room. Looks good. You could even take it, get rid of the show room link, and just change this to a a link to the room.name.capitalize instead, like this. And now you'll just have a list of links on the home page. And then maybe you want to do like a BR after each one so that each one looks like that. Cool. We can then click on general, for example, take us to the general chat room. And then here we need to render all of the messages. So this is where things start getting a little bit more involved. So the first thing we need to do is this ID for this DOM room is going to need to be attached to a controller because we're going to need to reset the form. So we're going to do a data-controller equals messages. I don't remember if we generated this messages controller. Let's come into the controllers. Doesn't look like we did, so let's stop the server, full screen this, do a Rails G stimulus messages. So this is going to be where we set up all our JavaScript, which isn't actually that much, but I like to say all of our JavaScript just to like make it sound like it's a lot, I guess. Okay, so we can start the server again, refresh. Let's come into our messages stimulus controller and do a console.log and say connected. The reason why I like to do this is because stimulus is a pain to work with, and I just want to make sure that we are actually logging the connection to the console so I can see that we're connected, and I'm not just assuming it's working. Okay. So that's done. The next thing we have to do is come back to our rooms. We'll hit F11. I'm going to hit Control plus one more time just so that people can actually see what I'm doing. Basically, we have this data controller right here. We then need to do a turbo stream from the DOM ID for the room. And if you're not familiar, this will convert the room's ID and the name into something similar to room underscore 24 if it's the 24th ID room, right? So that just gives us a nice string to work with. We don't need a do block here. We need to change this room name right here. We need to make this a H1. Let's do a H1. Hit tab, and then let's do a room.name like that. That'll give us our title. We then need a div with an ID. Well, let's call it messages so it's easier to work with. We'll hit tab on this, and then inside of this messages container, we need to do a data-message-target. And then we'll set this equal to, let's just call it container. This is going to be something that we're going to grab inside of our messages controller. So when we have our static targets list here, this is going to include the container. I think we're also probably going to have like an input in here once we set up the form. Okay, so this gives us our messages. What's next? We need to loop through our messages. So we need to say at messages.each, but we want to make sure if this doesn't exist that we check for that. So we do a message. So that ampersand there just says if the messages is empty, stop what you're doing and don't throw a nil messages doesn't exist. Stop trying to use a method on me error. In here, we then want to do a render for messages/message. We'll render a partial. We need to pass in a message. Do we need to pass in a room? No, I think we're good. We then want to probably create this, right? So let's come into our views, right click, new file or new folder, call it messages, right click on messages, new file, underscore message.html.erb. And then what do we do in here? This is going to be the turbo frame tag with a DOM ID of message do. Okay, so this gives us a message underscore 24 if it's the 24th one. Let's do a row. Oops, let's do a row because we're using Bootstrap. And then let's not do this. Let's instead just do a, let's just do some strings because this is the easiest way. Let's do a message.user.email.split at the @ symbol. Don't do what I'm doing ever. Put it in like a username model, but this will, give you the this will give you the first part of an email. So if it's like dean@example.com, this will just convert it to Dean and then capitalize it. And then over here we can do the message.body like that. That should work, I think. Let's come over here, let's refresh, make sure nothing's incredibly broken yet. Looks good to me. Okay, so we have that. Now let's we want to, we're going to want to go to like the, in the room page again, I guess. In the room page, we're going to want to do the form, probably down here, right outside of this div. Well, it's suggesting a form here, so I'm guessing this is a fairly common thing. Let's do a ID for a new message. I don't actually know if we're going to need this. Let's do a render for the messages slash form and a room of room, something like that. Let's come into the messages partial, right click new file underscore form.html.erb. And then in here, what we can do is a dot row dot call dash 12. Don't know if we're going to be using this, but just in case, we can then do we have simple forms. Let's do a simple form for, and we need to, we set it up with rooms. So we need to do a at room, which we have access to. And then I guess just a message dot new, right? And then in here, after this, we're going to want to do F. But in here, we're probably going to want to do a comma with some data for our stimulus controller. And then in here, it's going to be like a turbo action. So we'll say action, which will be turbo submit dash end. Yep. Okay, cool. And this will be the scroll to bottom. No, this will be the reset form. We don't need the scroll to bottom here. And then we'll say messages target is going to be the input form is what we'll call this. We have our do F, we'll do our end down here. And then in here, we're going to need to do the input for the body. That is true, but let's just leave it like this. Sure, why not? But in here, I want to do a dot input dash group and a dot input dash group dash LG. This will then format this a bit better. And then in here, we have the body with a label of false. Makes sense to me. Input of placeholder makes sense to me. Let's do another comma here. The wrapper underscore HTML. Let's set this to have a class of form dash control. And then let's do another comma here with a class of form dash control, because I don't know which of these needs the form control. So we're just going to give it to everything and hope one of those sticks. Again, the point of these isn't to necessarily make the best code. It's just to have a bit of fun and see how fast we can do stuff. Okay, so we have that. Let's come over here and refresh and see if everything's broken. This seems fine right now. We'll work with this. This is good for our form. Okay, so we have that. I think we're done in here now. Let's come back to the room and let's do we have the, where is it? The room. We have the form being rendered here. We have our messages. We need to do some styling on this because right now it's just a blank box. Let's come into style sheets application.scss. And for this, what I actually want to do is, we called it messages. I remember that, but in here, I want to just do some, create chat room messages container with scroll. We'll see if GitHub Copilot knows how to do this. 400 pixels seems fine. This is weird. 400 pixels. We need the overflow dash y. What is this thing's problem? Why is it doing this? Copilot, hello? Overflow dash y. Overflow dash x should be hidden. There we go. Okay. We need to do some padding. Let's see what it thinks the right padding is. Padding of, let's go with 2 EM maybe. We have the background color of F5, F5, F5. I don't know what color that is. This is not working. All right, let's just do it like this. Background color of DDD. We can do some border of 1 pixel solid. And let's give it the DDD color again. Actually, let's do like the AAA maybe. There we go. Let's do a border radius of 3 pixels. And let's do a, that should be good actually. I think this is fine, maybe. We can do like a margin of 1 EM, something like that. Let's grab this, come over here, refresh. That gives us our container. This seems fine. 1, 2, 3, right? We click send. Now, right now, I don't actually know if this is gonna do anything. Probably not. Cool. Missing controller, right? So we need to create a controller for this. Let's come into our controllers, right click, new file, call it the messages underscore controller.rb, give it a class of messages controller. There we go. Comes with a create action out of the box. What do we need in here? We're going to need to get rid of, this needs to be a body. First of all, we want this to have a before action, and then we'll say authenticate user. At message is going to be, current underscore user dot messages dot build with the message params. We want to do at message dot room ID. We have the params room ID being passed back here. Message save. We don't want to redirect. Instead, we want to come into the message.rb. And in here, what we're going to want to do is before, or I guess after commit, right? After commit, we're going to want to do a like a broadcast to the, what did we call it? We want to do a broadcast to the room, right? So after commit, we're going to say broadcast, and it goes to the bottom. So append to the room underscore, and then we grab the room ID just like that. Okay, so that should cause it to be broadcasted to that channel after something is created, right? But I don't know if this is actually going to be working when we do the creation. We do the post processing by messages controller, has the messages body with the room ID, and then it says unauthorized. So in the rooms controller, we want to do a before action authenticate user, right? Because we're not logged in. That's why it's giving us this error. There's the error message. Let's refresh. That'll force me to log in. deanin@example.com with a password. We're going to scroll in a bit. We do need to do the JavaScript. Let's come into the JS real quick in the messages controller. In here, we're going to need to do like the, we have the container. Let's do the input. Oops, the input form is what we called it. We have this connected. Let's change this to this.container target to make sure that we see what we are connecting to. We come in here, we do Control-Shift-I. It's telling us we don't have a container target yet. So we want to create the messages container, right? So that's in our, that's going to be in our room partial. We have the message container target. We need to change this, I think, to messages maybe. Come in here and refresh. There we go. We're getting the ID. And then in here, we're going to want to, we have this happening right here, not in the hello controller. We want to come into the messages controller. Here, we're going to want to do this dot reset scroll. We want to do reset scroll. And here, we're going to want to do const scroll height is equal to this dot container target dot scroll height, right? And then we want to say this dot container target dot scroll scroll to maybe, or scroll top. Let's go with scroll to 0 comma scroll height. I don't really think it matters. Something like that. Oops. Let's come in here and let's refresh real quick. If we do 1, 2, 3, is that going to throw a temper tantrum? Okay. Undefined method messages for user. Oh, we have to come into user.rb. A user has many messages with a dependent : destroy. A room has many messages with a dependent : destroy. And a message should belong to each of those. Okay. Refresh. There we go. 1, 2, 3. We're now submitting. So let's do this. Let's do 1, 2, 3. Copy this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Oh, it's already being added here. Cool. And then if we send this, we now need the event listener that causes this to scroll when a node is inserted. And I remember this. It is a container target. This dot container target.add event. Let's just tab this over. This is not a scroll. This is a DOM, all caps, NODE, inserted. You can come down here and do this.reset scroll. That's why we created it as a function. And then we can do something like this, save it, come over here, refresh the page, we need to add all these to the room. Good grief. Let's come into the rooms controller. When a room is set up, we want @messages to be equal to @room.messages, something like that, right? Over here, refresh. Now we're being scrolled to the bottom automatically. Let's do a magically send it. We're being sent to the bottom. That looks good. This needs to be cleared when we do a send. We're getting really close. So when we do that, we want to have a reset form, right? What did we call it? I don't remember. In the form, we had a reset form action. Come in here, reset form, and then in here we do this input form target. Refresh the page. Do a 1, 2, 3, hit send. It gets reset. It gets sent. Let's come over here to localhost port 3000. Let's sign in as john@do.com with a password. Come into the general room. Come down here and say hello. And we both see John's message. It gets cleared. We are done here, I think, in 21:41. Let's just go check another chat room just to make sure, but I'm pretty sure we nailed it. Yep, testing is still empty. I can come into testing and say first. And if we scroll up here, we can see that John sent the first message. Beautiful. 21 minutes and 41 seconds. All right. I think that's pretty cool. We have a working chat room system. There's no direct messages, of course. To do those, I think the way we did it last time is basically you just combine the ID of the users. So like in the case of John, we did something like if Dean is messaging John, then we set a custom room that is set to room underscore the ID of Dean and the ID of John. And then we made sure these were ordered by whatever their ID number was. But yeah, hopefully this was interesting, and hopefully I'll see you in the next video.